Wow. And this, I've been getting some flash memories of my Modesto time. John, you talked about the fog in the valley and that song, What a Wonderful World. That we had a big party for my in-laws at our ranch in Modesto. And I remember when I first moved in there, they talked about, well, wait till the 2-dot fog hits. I'm going, 2-dot fog? What are they talking about? Well, it didn't take too long. I think it was in November, December. I'm driving down to Alameda. I get out of my driveway and it is just foggy as heck. I get up to the 2-lane road and I look down and I can only see 2 dots, the 2 line markers. Oh, that's what they're talking about, 2-dot fog. So I learned to wait for the farm trucks to come by because this is 0 dark 30. And when those big farm trucks come by, man, I'd zip out and back them and follow them along. If he wrecked, I would wreck. But anyhow, because I couldn't see where I was going. So good memories today. Thanks, folks. Well, as John said, the title of my talk is Every Good Desire. Every Good Desire. And this morning I talk about how to show up and claim our every good desire, our purpose in life, and what spiritual tools do we have to kind of move us forward to this every good desire and our purpose. And somewhere on my computer desk, I've got a little cartoon that I've saved from the paper, and it's 2 guys standing on a beach, and one of them is holding a porpoise, and the other guy is standing next to him and says, "No, I said purpose." So sometimes as we go forward on our purpose, we can get sidetracked and grab a porpoise. So where are we heading? So sometimes we can get confused as we move forward in life. And, you know, our purpose, our desire, I've had that word desire broken down into its 2 syllables. D-sire, D-sire. D meaning of, sire of the Father. So those desires that we get, they're sourced in spirit. You know, they show up in our brain, I believe, from spirit, telling us, hey, this is where you should be going. And guess what? If spirit is placing it there, we're going to be given the means to accomplish these desires and every good desire. You know, humans, for the most part, we are not born with knowing what our purpose is. It seems like animals, they know exactly what their purpose is. You know, the birds outside my window here, the animals that I care for at the center, the SPCA, they know what their purpose is, you know. But we humans, because we have this power of thought, you know, we can get a little confused on what our desire and what our purpose is. And the purpose is what gives meaning to our life, you know, what gives intention to our life. And probably the easiest way to figure that out is when we wake up in the morning, not just what gets us out of bed. You know, when I was on active duty, the thought of not showing up for duty got me out of bed. But for, you know, what really sets our world on fire? What really calls to us, you know? And Gina, I heard you talking about that plan that you're doing for 5 years. That sounds like a desire to me. It's getting you moving and moving forward. So some time ago, Margie and I watched a movie called Marley and Me. Marley and Me. And it's a story about a fellow named John Grogan, and I understand it's a true story. And John Grogan was a journalism major in college, and he married his college girlfriend. Marley was the name of this Labrador type dog that he bought to keep his wife's mind off the idea of having a baby. And the story is, you know, Marley isn't anything but a well-behaved dog. But the story within the story is about John Grogan coming to know his every good desire. John was looking at envy with his friends who were reporters, and they're reporting on the big world events and all this other stuff. John was a columnist. And all through this movie there, you know, he was kind of bemoaning the fact that he's just doing a lonely columnist's work. But towards the end of the movie, he has this realization that his desire was to put the heart into the news of the day. And as by being a columnist, that's what he was doing. So he was being called forth to do what his deep desire was. He probably didn't even know about it this time. But he had that realization towards the end of the movie that he was achieving his every good desire by doing this job as a columnist, which to him, it seemed unimportant. Well, this story kind of resonated with me as I was called to ministerial school. I had a Coast Guard career. I had a private investigator practice. And I think in the back of my mind, there was always this calling of some type of being a minister. I remember as a little kid growing up in Chicago, my sister and I would play priest, and we would serve mass in this little table we had in our bedroom there. And I think there was always this inner calling and longing to get into ministry. And running into Margie, she invited me to a Unity church, and I went, oh my God, this is what I didn't know they had people like this, and I was drawn towards it. So showing up in the world and listening to our inner pushing and guidance, sometimes listening a little closer too. Ernest C. Wilson. And Ernest C. Wilson is Reverend Ernest C. Wilson. And he was a Unity minister that our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, turned the pulpit over in Kansas City, Missouri to Ernest Wilson. Ernest also went on and had a huge Unity following down in Hollywood, California. But Ernest Wilson has written a couple of books, and one of them I've read at least two of them. And the one that caught my attention for this talk was a book called Soul Power. And it's talking about following that inner prompting, which he called soul power. And early in his book, he says, before God brought forth the created world, he dreamed in his mind and heart. This pattern of creativity reaches down to the least of us, to all of us. Every invention and discovery started with an inner urge and prompting. And boy, that sure lines up with our third unity principle, that our thoughts are creative. Everything on my desk here and everything in front of you on your desk or house began with somebody's idea, and it came into fruition. So thoughts are creative. And he further noted in this book called Soul Power that we can call forth this inner desire through prayer. Interestingly, in a chapter entitled Every Good Desire, which is where I got the title for this talk from, Ernest comments, when you think regarding some opportunity, this is too much for me. I'll never measure up to it. People are sure to find out how stupid I am. You are closing the very door that you should, by your faith, persistence, patience, and courage, be opening up. Wow. I think Ernest hit on a thing that I had heard about before. It's called the Imposter Complex. Wow. It's a feeling of inner unworthiness that if people only knew, they know I'm a fraud. And two women psychologists and psychology professors in 1978 had done a study of this, particularly on women, that there's this feeling of inadequacy and unworthiness that they're not good enough, even though there's academic degrees, business successes, all these other things. They're dismissed as being luck or a fluke. So, and if people really knew, they would know they're a fraud. And some research believes that it stems from things that we're taught in childhood. And there were subsequent studies that this applies not only to women but to men as well. So every one of us is subject to that unworthiness. And I know there are times when things that come up in my life, I'll say, oh, I don't know. I say, oh my goodness, look what I have to turn and look and say, well, I've done that, and I've done that, and I've done that. Of course I can do this. I remember I was selected for one thing in the military one time, and man, I'm screaming at God, why me? And this little voice in the back of my head goes, why not you? I went, oh, and then I had the thoughts of, okay, I've done this, I can do that. Of course you can do this, Bob, whatever. So Ernest also points to a story from the book of Job, from the Hebrew Bible, about one of Job's friends, Eliphaz, showing up. Job had suffered all these calamities. Everything was taken away from him, and he's feeling really down. And three of his friends show up, and one of them was named Eliphaz. And Eliphaz says to him, agree with God and be at peace. Thereby good will come to you. Receive instruction from his mouth and lay up the words in your heart. And he goes on to say, you will decide on a matter and it will be established for you, and light will shine on your ways. So, Job's friends kind of showed up and they did some wonderful work with him. So they gave him some advice, but also they were kind of, God's out there and you're down here, a little bit of separation. And in unity, we believe that that spirit is right within us and within every person here. A gal named Rebecca Beard, she was a medical doctor for 20 years, and she recognized the tremendous influence that our thoughts have on illnesses. Sounds like she might have been a unity person. But she believed that by redirecting our thoughts and emotions, we can cure some of these illnesses. In her book called Every Man's Search, she had written this, and speaking about Job's friends. His friends could not answer the deep questions of his heart. All came and sat with him. They brought solace without comfort. One admires these friends of Job, however. In the first place, they came and sat with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spoke a word to him. They listened to all he had to say before they started to speak. That is superb friendship. And when they did speak, they gave him the conventional answers, but these did not seem to satisfy. Wow, well, Rebecca's words kind of spoke to me. Is that, when you're coming up to comfort someone, be like Job's friends. They sat for 7 days. In the Bible, the 7 is a significant number. So they sat with him for a week before they gave him their instruction. So I think the big thing there is, if you're coming to comfort, listen, be open and receptive to what people have to say. And then, even though they gave him conventional wisdom, he was there to comfort them. If we look at this story of Eliphaz and Job, put on our little unity metaphysical hat, Eliphaz, just look at the word, at the partner of Eliphaz, his friend there. Eliphaz was what was called a Temanite. He was one of Job's 3 friends, and he supposedly descended from the sons of Esau. And in Hebrew, his name means God of strength, whom God makes strong. So in this story of Job, I see Eliphaz as representing that power of strength, that one of the 12 powers that we have within us. And first of all, before we can activate our strength, activate any of our powers, we have to activate our power of will, which our Charles Fillmore, co-founder of our Unity movement, locates in our forehead. And he identifies the Matthew, the apostle, with the power of will. And will, it's the decision-making, directing, choosing faculty of the mind. The decision-making, directing, choosing faculty of the mind. And it moves all other faculties or powers into action. So to activate any of our 12 powers, we need the power of will. We need to make that choice, that decision. And the other power, the power of strength, Charles Fillmore identified that with the disciple Andrew. Now, Andrew was a big, strong fisherman, and he identified our power of strength is in our loins, our lower back area. So as we're moving forward in life to look forward to our every desire, we need to activate that power of will and do our steadfast sticking to it with our power of strength. So showing up for every desire in our life has a lot to do with what decisions we make and our power to stick to it. Came across a story of a little girl named Patty O'Connor. Now, Patty was in a rural schoolhouse, and one day she showed up at her teacher's desk, Mr. Johnson, and Patty had a severe stuttering problem. And I can remember how it is. When I was growing up, I would start to stutter a bit. My mom would say, Bobby, slow down. And I had a good friend of mine, John Doherty, and John had a terrible stuttering problem. And I was through grammar school and the high school with him. And sometimes John would be trying to talk about something, and he just felt so sorry for him because he couldn't get the words out. Well, Patty was in this category. So she shows up at her teacher's desk, and she told him in her stuttering, halting voice that she did not want to have a non-speaking part in the coming school pageant. She was tired of that. She wanted to read a poem. And her teacher, Mr. Johnson, looked at her sad face and her eager distribution and said, okay, I can get a speaking part for you. So Mr. Johnson searched in vain for a poem that Patty could read that would be okay with her speech problem. He couldn't find one. So he decided to make up a poem himself. It wasn't the greatest of literature, but it avoided all the words that began with syllables that he knew Patty would have trouble with. And it was custom made for Patty. So after school, for days and days, they practiced this poem. After a few short repetitions, Patty had it all memorized. And they worked with it and worked with it. And the day of the pageant came, Patty was going on with that. And the MC of the pageant comes to Mr. Johnson and says, there's got to be a mistake here on the program. Patty O'Connor is doing a recitation. He says, it's got to be wrong. Mr. Johnson says, no, it's okay. It's correct. Just do your job. So the program goes on, and just before Patty's due on, the MC comes up and says, look, I don't want her to feel embarrassed and stuff. Are you sure? And Mr. Johnson says, do your job, very forcefully. So the MC gets up there and he says, our next recitation is by Patty O'Connor. There's a gasp in the audience and a hushed silence. And her teacher, Mr. Johnson, had come in front of the curtain and sat down on the floor in front of her in the audience there. Curtain opens up, and there is Patty O'Connor, all dressed up, and she gave the poem flawlessly. She was mouthing the words of her instructor right in front of her. She gets all done, stands up nice tall, gives a nice gentle bow. The curtains close. There's dead silence, a few chuckles, and finally thunderous applause from the audience. So when I look at that story, both Mr. Johnson and Patty O'Connor had to tap in their power of will and their power of strength. They had to make that decision that Patty was going to go forward and overcome her teaching. And in fact, this comes from Chicken Soup for the Soul book, and it's called Obstacles or Barriers. Obstacles or barriers. So when we look out at life, do we have obstacles? We can overcome them. Do we have barriers? Barriers keep you out. So they saw that it was an obstacle that they could overcome. And they used their power of will. They made a decision, and they used their strength to stick to it and go on. Eric Butterworth, a longtime Unity minister, was talking about purpose and moving ahead in our life. In his book, his Spiritual Economics, he had written this: why be an average person? All the great achievements of history have been made by strong individuals who refused to consult statistics or to listen to those who could prove convincingly that what they wanted to do, and in fact ultimately did do, was completely impossible. So Eric Butterworth saying, hey, don't be average. No, don't listen to those naysayers. Go forward and do what's been called to do. So as we go forward today, and of course we hold John in prayer and lift him up, but if there's things that are calling to us, that heavy, deep desire that's we're being called for, kind of listen to that. So today, what do we do? We talked about showing up in life and doing what our life purpose is. We heard some stories, and we mentioned the two mental faculties that make up the Christ of our being, power of will and of strength. And this lines up very well with our fourth unity principle. It's not enough to know all these things. We need to put them into practice. So namaste, dear friends. Let's move into our period of meditative reflection. And I invite you to sit comfortably on your chair. Close your eyes if you would like, or let your gaze be softly forward and see these beautiful Hollywood Square types people, Hollywood Squares filled with beautiful, loving faces. Check in with our bodies, our body temple. Feel the pressure of our feet on the floor, the pressure of our body against our chairs or wherever we're sitting, the temperature of the air upon our exposed skin. Feel the gentle rise and fall of our chests as this wonderful process called respiration continues whether we're aware of it or not. And we're grateful for this wonderful, beautiful mechanism called our bodies that moves through the world and brings in through our senses all these wonderful, wonderful feelings, sounds, emotions into our deep recesses of our body. And I invite you to follow your next breath down into your heart center, into our lungs. And as our lungs fill with that air, if there's any cares or concerns or worries about the day ahead, the week ahead, see them mix with that air in our lungs. And as we exhale, send those worries, cares, or concerns up to that, what may be a gray sky over us, but we know that it's up there and the wind will take it and blow those cares away. We can pick them up later if we so choose, but for now we can just be carefree and worry-free. And following our attention down with our next breath, let our attention stay right on our heart center, right on our heart. Tuning into that area of our heart, perhaps we can feel the gentle beating of our heart. This wonderful muscle that pumps blood to every cell of our being. And if there's any part of our body temple that needs that healing hand of spirit, see that heart pumping spirit-filled, love-filled blood to that area and bathing it in a blue-white light bubble of healing energy, bringing forth right and perfect healing in a right and perfect way and in the right and perfect time. And if there's anyone that needs that healing hand of spirit, then I invite us to picture John in our mind's eye. Picture him at his most exuberant best at perhaps some time at the Grange Hall, that John was his best and sparkling with life. Just hold that image very clearly. And we see John wrapped in a blue-white light bubble of healing energy and healing spiritual guidance, bringing forth the right and perfect solution at the right and perfect time and in the right and perfect way. And now we bring our attention back to our own heart centers and let it rest there. And Jesus of Nazareth, when asked by his disciples, saying, "Lord, teach us how to pray." And we know prayer is one way of activating that soul power within us. So we've gone to the closet of our being, like Jesus told the disciples. Go to the closet of our being. And the Father, which hears in secret, speaks in a small, still voice, but rewards openly. So remaining in that closet of our being, we mentally shut the door to the outside world. And we keep our attention focused on our heart center, and we listen for what may be a small, still voice, or perhaps thoughts floating across our mind, or images flashing across the screen of our mind as we gently rest in the silence for a few minutes. And I'll ring a chime 3 times and we'll enter into that period of silence. And now, as we're in this prayerful, connected space to Spirit, I invite you to speak the name of any person, place, thing, or event that needs our prayers. Keep yourself muted, but speak that word out loud of anyone that needs, any person, place, thing, or event that needs that healing hand of Spirit to come forth mightily and lift them up. And now we let our attention go from our heart center out to our entire body. Feel our entire body as it sits on the chair, our feet on the floor. And perhaps in our time of silence and quiet, we heard a small, still voice, or thoughts flitted across our mind, or images flashed across the screen of our mind, or perhaps not. But we have made ourselves open and available to Spirit. And perhaps later today, a movie we're watching, a book we're reading, an email from a friend, a phone call from a friend will bring forth a message from Spirit of what is ours to do as we move forward and claim that heavy and deep desire of our life. And now we open our eyes